Hi there! You may not know me. I'm the guy from unpopular videos no one bothered to watch. I'm the voice of reason you're not supposed to be aware of and would likely ignore and/or loathe. Look, everyone, this really helpful, beneficial app just removed the sound from one of my videos, which means I have to jump through some hoops and try to appeal it if I feel like it. Not that I should have to, because freedom of speech should exist and people should be fighting for it. I'm about to show you a guy that's going to urge people to delete Facebook from their phones. In other words, uninstall it. It also comes factory bundled with phones, so that's a whole nother ball of wax having to do with LifeLog that people probably aren't thinking in terms of. Yeah. More importantly, once you've created a profile of yourself, it exists on the internet and is also likely cataloged. It's likely stored in, you could think of it as a dark server, so to speak. Once you do this, it doesn't go away. Some people will say, the internet is forever, but they don't apply it to, what's going on at the moment or in the near future or at all. Yeah. Also appreciate all censorship is fascist. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And promoting any censorship lends itself to more censorship. It's a slippery slope, mind you. I'm not going to rattle some of these things off, but I've done so in the past in terms of extreme examples. The thing is to do the right thing. You don't just hide what other people are talking about. The moral majority bands together and does the right thing, and it will eclipse or overcome or trounce things that are horrible. Instead of, hiding under your pillows with your fucking safety blanket and turning a blind eye or avoiding, what's going on. That's what people have been lending themselves to, catering to these days, instead of actively taking part and doing the right thing. They see that more people, more often than not, also do the right thing. So here's this guy's words of wisdom.
Hey,
Whoops, 1 second. And I'm going to bookmark it in case it disappears in a second. Let's see.
Hey, y'all want to send a message to him about banning TikTok? How about we all just delete Facebook off our phones? That's all we got to do. Just delete Facebook off our phones. And show them that we ain't playing. Because they want to leave us with these toxic negative apps when we had a beneficial app that was very informative.
You say negative?
We ain't playing. Because they want to leave us with these toxic negative apps when we had...
He not only said toxic, which anybody with a pecker in their pants wouldn't use because it's social engineering jargon in place to divide men and women. But he also said negative. If anybody's paying attention, Positive Vibes Only is a polarizing campaign in place to promote censorship. The very thing he's fucking speaking against, supposedly. This is one of the many reasons why I say you and I are surrounded by people who are not thinking for themselves. You got to choose the words that come out of your mouth. And he's not doing that, at least not wisely. I popped a joke earlier about wisdom, but most of you would probably go right over your heads.
Beneficial app that was very informative and helping a lot of people.
What TikTok is one of the best examples of a propaganda campaign being well circulated. Most things you find on TikTok are garbage. Absolute fucking garbage. Adult fairy tales at best. The bits and pieces that still reflect reality, typically speaking, are removed from fucking TikTok. And if people were using their brain, they would understand that. Again, think about what I started out saying, having to do with any censorship is fucking censorship. And all censorship is fascism. It's fascist. Patently fascist. By definition. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I'm being redundant because people need to hear shit like that. And that's also how our masters got us. That's why this guy rattled off toxic and negative, because he was trained to repeat that shit whether he realized it or not. And it's effective, because he did rattle that off in here. If you assume that's just a coincidence, how many people out there do rattle off the jargon, the fucking social engineering jargon, cooked up at the Tavistock Institute? And most of you out there don't know what that is.
So they want to take that away, but leave us with the trash. All we gotta do is just delete Facebook. They can see how many people deleted Facebook off their phones. Let's beat them to the punch, and we'll see it pop up on TikTok before that day.
Remember, if you uninstall Facebook from your phone, if you still have an account that you could log into your desktop or your laptop or your fucking pad or whatever you want to think of, it still exists. I mean, he didn't think about the words coming out of his mouth. Does he mean deactivate your Facebook, aka LifeLog account across the board? Or just uninstall it from your phone? This reminds me of when I remember a time, I remember fucking MySpace. But back to point. Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But I remember a time when you could access your messages on Facebook. And you didn't need an additional app, an extra step. It's also one of the prime examples of an extra step when it was first introduced. In other words, Facebook worked. You could see your messages. You could access them, etc., etc. And you didn't need to have another app, which means it fucking worked. And it worked fine. It wasn't great, but it worked. But they wanted you to consent to something else so that you would lose more liberties or more freedoms or however you want to think of that. So that they could access more of your data. Because you and I are training the AI, we're profiling ourselves, and the list fucking goes on. It's a consent-based system, and most of us, myself included, to limiting degrees, we've bought into this shit and we're doing the exact opposite of what we should fucking be doing. And you don't hear people rattling any of this off. Instead, you see a lot of people like this kid out there who's still reinforcing the fucking narratives, the official narratives in place to keep us down, in somebody else's pocket, under somebody's thumb. And the list fucking goes on in terms of analogies, but I still probably didn't get through to you. Because most of you are so fucking hard-headed and, dogmatic and stuck in your fucking ways, you're never going to pull your head out of your ass. And if you assume otherwise, or you think I'm just being mean, etc., etc., look around. Things are bad because you and I are surrounded by people who don't know what's going on. They are not thinking. They are reacting. This is why I stress, research, don't react. Most people confuse entertainment with what? And some of you out there should be able to answer that. Most of you probably can't. Or wouldn't take the time to. That's why all of this shit has traction. That's why these agendas are afoot.
Just uninstall it. And y'all want to send a message to them about banning TikTok? How about we all just delete Facebook off our phone?
And TikTok got back to me during the course of this. What's it say? Oh, look. But should I have to jump through those hoops? No. And if I didn't, if say they made this even more cumbersome to have to jump through, a lot of people wouldn't do it. A lot of people would just delete the video or say fuck it. And our masters use those tactics as well in a number of examples. I'm not going to rattle any of those off right now. So some of you would say, well, then you don't have any. You could think about it. And if you were doing the right fucking thing, you would already know what those are because you would have already experienced that shit. Motherfucker. I'm currently cataloging something people aren't supposed to know, but I'm surrounded by people like this, which means they wouldn't appreciate it. Even if I spoon-fed it to them on a silver fucking platter. Let's play the video, then I'll jump back to that.
Fascist countries ban apps. Fascist countries ban websites. Fascist countries ban apps and websites under the guise of threats to national security, when every other country knows it's about suppressing the free speech of its citizens. If the government believes that a single app could, quote from the hearing on the 10th, skew the perspective of America.
Free speech no longer exists because people bought into calling censorship patently fascist censorship. Shadow banning, canceling, polarizing positive vibes only, dismissing people who make fucking sense as quote-unquote haters. There's quite a bit of jargon, all of which was spoon-fed to people like this, and they repeated it. Now, an app is being threatened to be taken away, and suddenly all these kids are, don't take my entertainment away! Heaven forbid! I believe that it's, the bee's knees. The bastion of truth. I got my finger on the pulse because Our masters are constantly ringing, the Pavlov's dogs? Yeah, the bell, so to speak. At the top of your feed, you are spoon-fed shit, and I do mean shit. How many of these kids scroll for days without looking away to find something that fucking matters? How many of you out there know what I'm talking about? When you scroll down, it drags you back to the top of the stack the moment you're fucking distracted because our masters are shitting out superficial fucking retards. And these retards don't realize that they're being manipulated on the DARPA internet. This is relevant, and I've said it too many times, and you probably won't see this video. Long ago, there's a thing known as the Davos panel, and long ago, a public transcript was made public. In other words, you have access to it. And in this transcript, our masters said they were going to give you and I numerous forms of communication to echo narratives. These are these are adult fairy tales, the official narrative, as I referred to it. Bullshit. This is the shit you're spoon-fed at the top of your feed. This is the shit that people are spoon-fed on fucking TikTok and YouTube and LifeLog 2.0, Instagram, and the list goes on. Because our masters control all of these things. The public transcript that the Davos panel cooked up many, many decades ago openly stated they were going to spoon feed us all these different forms of communication. This is why AOL discs were free. This is why you get a free cell phone when you sign up for a plan, because they want you carrying that shit around. They wanted to normalize that. They wanted you to do this because you're carrying around a tracking device that constantly listens to you. It's quite literally what people would call a surveillance state. And they wanted us to set up profiles so that we would profile ourselves, as well as training the AI and doing their job for them. This is why social media is free. Otherwise, there would be a subscription. You and I have to rent everything else that we need. And we don't need this. Social media is a blight. It's a plague. It has set people back further than they'll ever fucking realize. And here people are just catering to it, whining about it, squealing about their, adult fairy tales. They're going to take that away from me. Meanwhile, these kids are circulating the fucking propaganda. That's why things are bad. That's why things are getting worse and worse and worse. And I rattle that off often because most people don't see it for what it is. There are so many aspects to this, and one of the big ones that I constantly complain about because people still haven't figured out something very neat and something very fucking dark and horrible that took place a very long time ago. But it's relevant because an entire generation doesn't understand the difference between a man and a woman because they were spoon-fed a fucking narrative on the DARPA internet and they bought into it instead of looking into it. It's one of many examples. Meanwhile, you and I are still surrounded by people who, chicks like this and dudes out there, one too many of them still believe in voting. But they're the same people that would still call America a country, is my point. I've left a lot of things online that you could think about and reason out, but most people don't see what I leave online because I am making sense if you fucking think about it. Most people out there dismiss me outright and assume otherwise. They run squealing towards the hills and or block me. Ignore me. Because the moment you cut me out, you are bombarded with. You have how much fucking entertainment at your disposal. Even if TikTok does get shut down, because this is a divisive tactic right now, our masters are seeing who's going to react. They're tracking this shit. They're tracking reaction times, among other things, as well as how many people are going to out themselves and actually say something that matters. All of this is being documented. Anything in a digital format, anything connected to Wi-Fi, you can't fucking trust it, nor should you. Whining about things like this paints a target on my back, but most people don't see these things because I am censored and blah, 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 blah. But these are things you should think in terms of if you ever do choose to do something that actually fucking matters. And if you do, you're going to run up against a bunch of people like this who aren't going to fucking think about what you have to say. Despite the fact that you can string everything I'm urging you to think in terms of together. It all leads somewhere. It's all interconnected, unlike the disjointed fucking propaganda people will urge you to buy into and repeat. because they effectively work for our masters. They aren't worth their salt. They have their heads up their ass. They're quite slow. It's a temporary system, which means you could change this. You could choose to do something else. But most people aren't willing to, because thinking is hard, which is why they're incapable and or unwilling to appreciate what came out of my fucking mouth and why I took the time and energy to leave this rant on the DARPA internet.
American citizens to be anti-American? Maybe the real problem is that American citizens are already in such a state of political unrest and unhappiness that our government is scared a single...
She just said political unrest. That means she's using the very system that is in place to subjugate you and I to try to illustrate a point. And I do mean try. Emphasis on fucking try. We could have a laugh right now, you and I. There is no try. There's only do.
Foreign influence could tip the scale and have it all be over. Don't you think that by taking away the, and I quote, key communications channel of Americans, it's gonna make those 107...
Have yourself another laugh. The key communication for Americans is a Chinese app? Does that make any sense? Does that make a lick of fucking sense? With Team America and just how great America supposedly is and what people have been trained to repeat. The land of opportunity and all that other crap. We're so fucking free. We're quite literally censoring one another and policing the internet for our masters. I'm going to report you. I believe in censorship. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? That's just one example.
70 million Americans a little more anti-American? Maybe Congress knows and understands that. Maybe the government knows that the backlash it will receive from banning TikTok does not outweigh...
Government doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I'll say this again, and I've said this too many times. The Republic fell during the Civil War and was finalized in 1871. 1871 marks the year when the Organic Act established the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia is a phony fucking jurisdiction. It's a third party, so to speak. It's something that doesn't have anything to do with what America once stood for. Do think of America in all lower caps, because it's relevant in terms of what it once was and allegedly stood for. But the moment that the Organic Act introduced and established a city-state, a phony fucking jurisdiction to govern things, so to speak, this changed everything. America should be spelled in all capital letters because it is a corporation, which is what you would see if you do look up documents having to do with America after that fact, which also proves that it's a fucking corporation. And there is, I can't remember what it is. I have it in my phone somewhere, and maybe I'll splice it in here, but I probably won't. It's in writing stating that America is a fucking corporation. That's something people could look up. It's one more bone I don't usually throw people, but it does prove my point. Now, she also said citizen. So after that fact, after 1871, in 1913 to be specific, people weren't doing the right thing. They weren't acting like adults. So the Federal Reserve was established under the pretense of being both voluntary and temporary. It still is. But you and I are surrounded by people like this, and they still reaffirm that narrative. Phony fucking shit. A third-party system again. To do what? Impose on, govern, manipulate, and subjugate you and I. And that exists. So in 1913, anybody who identified as a citizen of the United States became a debt slave. Why would I say that? Because all debt became debt-based. What do I mean? No gold standard, no silver standard, no standard. So all greenbacks, promissory notes, etc., etc. Currency as you would think of it became debt-based. This is why some superficial people out there will whine and wax poetic, because it was something they were spoon-fed. They were taught by controlled opposition assets like, Russell Pine, a.k.a. Jordan Maxwell? Because he worked for our masters. It's a consent-based system, which is why he told you these things, and this is why people still repeat those videos. They regurgitate it. They repost it. They don't film their own information free of the disinformation. But this is why they know about straw men and birth certificates and being traded on the stock exchange because you and I are quite literally the fucking value. You and I have a trust in our names and we do not have access to it because you and I are debt slaves. We're cattle. Or chattel, pardon me. You and I don't matter. We're a means to an end. We put bread on our master's tables. So I said 1871, yeah? America became a corporation. 1913, citizens became debt slaves. By 1933, the Corporation of America was intentionally bankrupted. These are broad strokes. A lot more happened in between all of this shit. But by 1934, and I fucking hate that app, it constantly fucking whines at me and I have not used it in probably a year and a half. Because they fucked up last time. I think the only time I ever used it. Either way, back to point. 1934, Fort Knox no longer contained gold. And these are usually the crude bullet points that I will rattle off and spoon feed people. I've had people whine at me. America's not a crown colony. It's not this. It's not that. It's not a corporation. It doesn't say so in the Constitution. Our masters aren't going to put it clearly in writing that you and I are slaves and all of this is a joke. Because if people saw that, they might actually do something. Years ago, I used to joke around. Some of you have probably heard me say it. The only way things are going to change is if somebody kicked in our door and turned off Game of Thrones. That's no longer relevant. But choose your popular programming and apply it to what I just said. Same applies to fucking TikTok. You see how people are reacting. They are pissed off about this. But they haven't been pissed off enough to do the right thing about the numerous other infringements on our rights, so to speak. On natural law. You and I are quite free. Technically. But you and I maintain each other's cageless prison. Which is to say, we reaffirm the phony fucking narratives, what I call the official narrative. The garbage in place to quite literally fuck you and I up. And again, police one another for our masters. And that's exactly what most people do. Words have power. Most people don't appreciate this. I complain about emojis. Yeah, I'm talking about emojis now. I'm talking about truncating your words. Saying bro every 3 seconds. Or YNTS. Anacronyms. Emojis are written into the algorithm and dumb people down. If people are dumbed down, they're going to buy into agendas more likely than not. Would you agree? The same applies to idiots who can't spell their words. If you're not spelling your words, you're not articulating yourself, which means you're not training your brain. You're not striving to be the best and the brightest. You're not raising your vibration or doing anything, remotely close to doing the right fucking thing in a very Spike Lee sense. Even though he is a Zionist puppet, make no mistake. Never trust a celebrity puppet. But the sentiment of do the right thing stands true. How many of you are still listening? Most people tune out instead of tuning in. I'm making a lot of sense if you fucking use what I said as a tool. If you look into it. If you don't just say, well, some of that sounds good. And you pick and you choose like a cherry picking piece of scum. How many of you are truly willing to buckle down and do hard things to see that things get better and are abundant and harmonious? Ranging from the system you and I inhabit in terms of environment to what these idiots would think of, in terms of socio-political, this, that, and the other thing. Society, community. I mean, just to simplify it. What you and I experience when we go out the door and we interact with people. What people technically know. And technically they don't know much. They don't know a damn thing, to be honest. What people repeat are quite literally narratives, official narratives upon official narratives, which is to say fallacies, propaganda, adult fairy tales. To simplify it further, paradigms, stories, narrow parameters. Everybody's running around with fucking horse blinders on, and that's what they talk about, is the garbage they were spoon-fed and raised with. The garbage that's been well-financed and well-circulated, which is why you're familiar with it, and that's why people repeat things like test tube aliens. Well, technically they call it aliens, but there's no such thing. It's impossible. And that's another example. I'm not referring to the flat earth or the globe theory, mind you, because both of those are also official narratives of bullshit. What do I mean by that? And I've said this a lot. You can't use either of those as a fucking tool. That's how you know neither of those reflect reality as a whole. But more importantly, there's similarities between the two. I'll say this again since I've rattled it off numerous times, and maybe you'll sit through this video. You never fucking know. I'm trying to talk really fast to keep you engaged. So our masters are selling us a broken clock. Imagine our masters smashing a clock across the floor. That's what you see, and that's what you think of when you talk about, adult fairy tale galaxies. Disconnected bullshit, There's planets and galaxies and this, that, and the other thing. It's no different from disconnected domes and sensationally titled islands, supposedly having to do with the flat earth now, and a CIA-sanctioned narrative, if I'm not mistaken, that was shopped around roughly in 2017, I think, originally. And you can buy that bullshit on Amazon. And it's doing quite well.
The threats that come with its existence. Not in a matter of national security, but in a matter of being the most popular news and media outlet that the government cannot control, like American-owned broadcasting networks and publications.
This guy was so
if
dumb.
this was actually a national security concern, the government would be banning all Chinese-developed apps, like Shein and Temu, that collect the exact same amount of data as TikTok. Because maybe it knows TikTok is something special. You can't politically organize on Temu. If TikTok goes dark, the government deliberately and knowingly took away your free speech.
We have no free speech, and you would know this if you were using TikTok and leaving shit on here that matters. I'm dead fucking serious. Anything I've ever left on here that fucking is relevant, and keep in mind, I can't leave the video I just recorded, the rest that I just rattled off, I can't leave that on TikTok because it will be removed. Or the audio will be stripped from it, against my wishes. Because freedom of speech doesn't exist. It does not exist. And I experienced this same bullshit on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and the list goes on. And I've stressed this before, Snapchat is exclusively for superficial, stupid fucking people. You can't post anything on Snapchat that matters. Nothing whatsoever. And that's not a far cry from TikTok. It's not. So all this shit that people are praising on here is entertainment. It's propaganda. To varying degrees, mind you. But it's garbage. And people don't realize it. Every single kid I've seen react having to do with this does not understand what I just fucking said. Because they don't have eyes to see. They don't see the forest for the trees, which is what I keep rattling off these days.
Do not accept national security for an answer. Ever. Fascist countries
What happened?
ban apps. Fascist countries
What the fuck
ban
just happened?
websites. Fascist countries...
You did just see that, did you not? Give me a second and I'll get back to it. What I was going to complain about was down on the bottom it said, get angry. Do you think it should be get angry or be angry? You should be upset. You should be mad as hell and not take it anymore. Well, I failed at that task. I didn't bookmark that one, so that one's lost. I could go back and watch the screen recording. I could plug in her handle and listen to the rest of the superficial fucking rant, but I'm not going to. You can if you want, because her video is still going to be alive and well tomorrow on the fucking, DARPA internet connected to TikTok. But if I said the same thing she was rattling off in there, I would probably be censored. I shit you not. As it reads... Everything will be fine. Remain calm. There is no reason to fill in the blank.
American TikTok users installing a Chinese app, RedNote, directly on their phone because of the TikTok ban is hilarious. And so is this comment. Welcome, we've been waiting for you so we can continue our job as a Chinese spy. I thought I lost you guys. Enjoy RedNote. It's currently charting at #1. Americans are literally learning Mandarin and voluntarily giving all of their data directly to China. Congratulations, American government. Instead of passing a broad sweeping data protection law, you created a scenario that bans the most popular app, which has led for Americans to mass download the Chinese version of TikTok. You flopped so hard at protecting children's data that now children are tweeting to spite you that they made their username their social security number so that their RedNote guy can get promoted faster. What have you done? Senator Ed Markey just introduced the Extend the TikTok Deadline Act to Congress. It would give Congress 270 days to go okay, sorry, we made a really hot mess. Let's do something else. Let's figure out a plan B, right? Our job right now is to call our senators and our representatives and say, please support Ed Markey's law so that this app doesn't just go dark. And also you can follow Senator Markey. I've tagged him down here, and you can comment, and he is actually reading out about some of his comments to Congress. So you have the opportunity to interact with the gov directly through his profile.
Just to spell it out for you, and keep in mind, I could be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, everything we're experiencing right now in terms of being manipulated, having to do with China and America, these bullshit tensions, they both work for the same people. They're both in bed together. Consider the fact that they both signed the Antarctic Treaty. It's one of numerous examples. Consider the fact that the Corporation of America owes how much money supposedly to China. Consider the fact that we interact with them and how many things are, made in China. I mean, it's not fucking rocket science, because rocket science isn't rocket science. It's a parabolic arc that ditches in the sea. But back to point, all of these narratives that are being put in place, it's no different than a game of chess. These are the pawns, or technically you and I are the pawns. And by buying into these narratives, we are paving the way for bullshit. It's just going to be another narrative in terms of tensions between these two corporations, supposedly, to paint a picture. And this picture has to do with what people would call World War III. It's another staged fucking war. People are going to die. There's going to be an act of greater magic, otherwise known as a blood sacrifice. And you and I are making that possible right now. People didn't buy into this if they weren't playing the fucking game, if they were thinking for themselves and not fucking reacting and doing the right fucking thing. None of this would have fucking traction. If you and I were banding together, organizing, and willing to execute a fucking plan outside of digital means, mind you, outside of an electronic format connected to Wi-Fi, governed by the fucking AI, monitored, what do people say, 24/7? Well, maybe we could change things and do the right thing. Uproot our masters, cut the heads off the snakes, or pull up the weeds at the root, and start over like adults. Not tear apart the infrastructure that's holding society together, which is another narrative currently being shopped around and people are buying into it. What I'm saying is, don't tear apart what you would consider capitalism. Even though in recent times, capitalism has been damned, right? It's being dragged through the mud. But if it was mom and pop, if it was wholesome, if it was community, as people would think of it. I'm dumbing this down for you, by the way. If it was grassroots and it was coming from the fucking heart and it benefited you and I, no third parties, and if each one of these communities was willing to do the right thing and in tow or in tandem work with one another, we could build a network of communities that are mom and pop, and this is what capitalism would be. It works quite well. That's the funny part about everybody who's bought into, death to capitalism. It's so fucking evil. It's this, that, and the other thing. It's because you and I put a bunch of phony fucking people in power and we put bread on their table. And now that falls under the umbrella of what people would think of as capitalism. What the fuck do I know? To prove that good people tend to be gullible, would you agree that eating is a crucial ingredient if you and I hope to survive? In other words, a necessity. You can think of, the rule about 3 minutes without air, 3 weeks without food, and 3 something or other. If I said it right. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. So, only a group of gullible people would allow someone else, and this is also an example of a third-party interest or a phony fucking jurisdiction, stepping in and taking control of something that is crucial to our survival. In other words, we forfeited the control of, as a community or as a people, we forfeited any and all control of our food supply. It's pretty fucking stupid, would you agree? It's absolutely fucking stupid. It makes no sense whatsoever. But good people tend to be gullible, and when they're presented with entertainment or a flowery fucking narrative, what do they tend to do? They buy into it instead of looking into it. And they assume, it couldn't get that bad. How bad could it get? Rose-colored glasses. and a heap of bullshit. Because what do I usually say? Complacency got us this far. And that's just one more example that we do experience, does reflect reality, and we are currently still living under.
America should be feeling humiliated right now. China made an app so popular that the government has to ban it. That means communist China beat free market America at capitalism, all right? That's like your whole thing, America, and you lost. This is as bad as that time that Asian dude won the hot dog eating contest 6 times in a row. China beat us so bad at mindless entertainment, we need the government to save us. Oh no, TikTok's too popular. Now we're addicted to our phones that are also made in China.
What choice do our leaders have here? China's using TikTok to influence people.
Oh, trust me, I know. Before I used TikTok, I was a white guy in Iowa named Mike Sullivan, okay? Look at me now.
Wait, is that true?
Is that true? No, you idiots. That's just how susceptible we all are to misinformation. And it doesn't matter what app you use, okay? I wouldn't be surprised if the next election is swung by Uber Eats. Like, here's your spaghetti, vote for Donald Trump. Okay, I will. Whatever you say, Mr. Spaghetti.
Hey, Ronnie, you're not being fair. Americans aren't gullible. It's that TikTok is an incredibly powerful tool for spreading misinformation.
Yeah, because that misinformation is entertaining. Facebook has just as much misinformation, but it's boring as shit. How am I supposed to get behind conspiracies that come from your great aunt who can't even pop and lock?
Ni hao, it's your Chinese spy. I hope you have enjoyed the content I have hand-selected for you over the years, but in case we don't get to see each other on here again, here are some tips and tricks to using RedNote. First thing to keep in mind is that this flood of Westerners is not something the app is designed to handle. You need to verify your phone number with them before you can do anything except just scroll, and it might take you a few tries to get a verification code, but it will come, just keep trying. There's no need to do weird stuff like, oh, let me turn off my Wi-Fi, or like, go into like this setting, this specific setting. No, just keep trying. Just keep hitting that button. If you find that your interface is in Chinese, go to the bottom right tab. That opens up your profile, and then hit the gear button beneath your bio to open up settings. And then the second tab with the gear icon again is general settings. And then once you open that, the first option is the one to switch languages. You can change your display name and bio by tapping on the profile button beneath your bio. But remember, you can only change your display name once per week and your bio 3 times per week. You can also change your ID from a string of numbers to something more unique, but I think you can only do this once ever. When you're writing the description for a post, you can hit this button to expand the text field so that it's not blocked off by all the suggested tags. And the tags are case sensitive, by the way. So there's a difference between TikTok and TikTok. You can use a maximum of 10 tags per post. RedNote does not currently have in-app translation functions, but you can download a separate on-screen translator app like Bubble Screen Translate. Once you activate it, it gives you a floating widget, and then every time you tap it, it can translate everything on your screen while you stay in RedNote. So this would make your life a lot easier. Like, there is no need to like screenshot every single comment and then run to Google Translate. Chinese has a lot of colloquialisms though, and then even if with the translation, sometimes you're not going to understand stuff without context. For example, we like to call foreigners Wagoran, which literally translates to crooked fruit nut. And it's a playful spin on the way foreigners pronounce Wagoran, which is the actual term for foreigners. So if you see yourself getting called a nut, you're getting called a foreigner. Another example is that the default display name on RedNote is Little Sweet Potato. This is because Little Sweet Potato is a homonym for Little Red Book, which is the actual Chinese name of RedNote. A lot of times people will just straight up use the sweet potato emoji to indicate the app. And speaking of emojis, the dog emoji is something really important because it's a tone indicator for sarcasm or something that's said in a joking way. If you interact with Chinese locals, you're probably going to get called by a familial term like sister, brother, uncle, aunt. It's just the way Chinese culture is. And those using uncle or aunt are probably elementary to middle school age children. So remember that there are a lot of minors on that site, so like keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that being non-binary is like not a generally accepted concept in China. So the app will force you to pick a gender between male and female, but you don't have to take the option to display it on your profile. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff to do with queerness did get bundled up with anti-Western sentiment in the general Chinese consciousness, so you might see people making jokes like, oh, I can't believe the US has 72 genders. Like, that's very annoying, but you have to remember that ultimately China is still a fairly socially conservative country. There are vibrant queer communities on RedNote, but I'm hesitant to let you guys know how to find them because too many Westerners flooding their tags might make trouble for them. I think it's best for you guys to not disturb that ecosystem when they have worked so hard to carve out spaces for themselves. So I don't suggest going around asking provocative questions like, oh, how do you feel about gay people? And definitely don't start lecturing the locals if you see them say something you don't like. It will only have the opposite effect. Like Global South countries hate it when Global North countries start lecturing them. Leave the discourse to the locals. Remember that you are a guest on this app. Anyway, that's it for now. If you have more questions, feel free to ask me. I'm fully bilingual. RedNote lets you include pictures in the comments, so if you see anything that confuses you, just screenshot and ask me there.